Hi, my name is Unity Stoakes, co-founder at Startup Health. Really looking forward to today's conversation with two extraordinary health transformers, longtime health transformers in startup health, the dynamic duo behind Sen-Jam, senjam.com, sen-jam.com, Jim Iversen and Jackie Iversen, who are going to share some exciting updates about the progress they're making with their phase 2 trials that they're doing with Duke on anti-inflammatory innovation and bringing really exciting innovation to market that's going to help us reduce inflammation, help with prevention, and really tap into the wave of innovation that intersects with GLP-1s and a lot of the other important things going on that are going to help with healthy lifespan and help just improve our well-being through the long journey of life. So stick around, it's going to be a great show.
Crazy.
Wonderful. I am here with two extraordinary health transformers, longtime health transformers from Startup Health, and we are going to get all the exciting updates from Sen-Jam and everything that you're doing. I think the last time I saw both of you was during JP Morgan at the Exploratorium. I know you've seen a bunch of others on the Startup Health team, but it was so nice to get to see you at the Exploratorium and spend time in person together. How have you guys been?
We've been great.
Yeah, we're excited about the progress that we've made in Sen-Jam, some of the recent large milestones that we've hit, and looking forward to sharing them with you.
Well, let's dig into that. Just kind of to frame the conversation, remind people, tell us about Sen-Jam and your mission. Let's start there, just to kind of reacclimate everybody with the amazing work that you guys have been doing. And then let's dig into all the exciting updates. But what's your mission?
Yeah, our mission is to shape health science so that every life may flourish. And we do that by focusing on age-related diseases and longevity, primarily in the inflammation space. So with my background in supply chain prior to joining Sen-Jam, doing diligence on Sen-Jam, we looked at how inflammation's impacting all of us. And 60 to 70% of deaths are inflammatory related. At the end of life, it's such a inflammatory crisis, which is kind of built up all through life. Jackie has come up with great ideas on how we can address inflammation further upstream and earlier to either prolong or prevent those diseases from occurring. And we're really focused on this in this area called Healthspan. And Healthspan is the gap between lifespan, how long we live, and when we can live without disability or disease. And right now in the United States, that gap is 12.4 years. And throughout the world, that gap has been constantly increasing. So from a preventative perspective, that's the target we're going after. We're looking at what we can do to shrink that gap, not only shrink that gap so that people can live healthier and flourish more, but they can also live longer. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, Jackie, it's so nice to see you. And you've been on our stage so many times. This is such an important topic, this gap between lifespan and health span. Share a little bit more about you, your background, and how you see this opportunity.
That's a great question. And I can't wait to let everybody know that, years ago, as a hospital pharmacist, I was tasked with what drugs do we buy into our hospital to treat our community. And my director said to me, we got a real problem here. We're spending huge amounts of money on drugs and we don't have good outcomes. And I want you to fix that.
Big problem, big challenge.
Right? And I kind of said, well, all right, I'm a pharmacist. I can figure this out. And what I realized is that we spend so much of our pharmaceutical spend and our healthcare dollars, trillions of dollars, that go into this model that is all based on what people call sick care. It means that you become sick and therefore you need a treatment. But unfortunately, after all that tissue damage and disease has taken root, we really don't have technologies to regenerate those cells unless we get into regenerative medicine, which other people are working on. But what my solution became is how do we prevent that damage from occurring in the first place to prevent all this chronic illness? And so that was really my mission, my goal, my vision for the future is let's change how we're taking care of people so that they can have the longest lives lived with the healthiest bodies possible. And so this is what I am introducing to the world as this solution of if we can decrease inflammation, because it's the inflammation that progresses chronic illness. If we can prevent that from progressing, then we have a chance of changing our trajectory into the future.
And stepping into some of the economics of this, healthcare in the United States, it's like a universal constant. It's like pi. It's 20% of GDP.
Seems like it keeps going up and increasing too.
Yeah, and that's about $5 trillion of annual spend in health spend. But 90% of that is on hospitals, doctors, and long-term care. And that's why the work that we're doing is so important. In the 500 billion part on the therapeutic side, pharmaceutical side, we're looking at developing these preventatives so that people can live longer. Because as we're all aging, there's going to be such a greater need. Baby boomers continue to age for end-of-life care. And just to be able to rely on paid care is going to be tough. You're going to rely on families taking care of families. And that's why we want to address this now. And what we found is this is just not people in their 50s and 60s that are thinking about it. The younger generations are really focused on this as well.
Let's dig into your solution. Let's talk about the solution that's focusing on anti-inflammation to start, and then the update on where you are in the progress of bringing this solution to the world. I think you've made such extraordinary progress, and I'd love to, one, just dig in, double tap on, in practical terms, what is this solution? How will people bring this into their lives? In what form? And then where are you in bringing this solution to the world and some of those updates?
Great. So our idea begins around pharmacologic science, right? I wanted to make a medication that could be accessible to all, could be fast to market, and cost to zero. And the reason is because I want everybody in the world to have access to being able to decrease their inflammation so that everybody has access to having the longest health span possible. And these are some really big goals that I had for making such a product. But what we did is we searched through the literature and we came up with a medication, and it turned into a platform, an entire platform of agents that can be used for multiple indications. And I know this sounds like very broad and kind of futuristic, but when we look at inflammation and how inflammation affects our bodies, this is a solution that nobody's come up with in the past. This is a solution where we can decrease inflammation by multiple pathways throughout your body. And we can do it with the safety of being able to take these products for long term with the safety profile that nobody else has.
Is this something you take as a pill every day? Early, you mentioned prevention. So this is something that you actually start taking at what age to help prevent inflammation as you're aging? I'm curious about some of those details.
Yes. Unity, the first problem that we have with getting this medication to everybody around the world is we need to get through the FDA approval process. And we are working with a system that needs to desperately be updated because they have realized, too, that this antiquated FDA pathway system does not allow for drugs like ours to easily be put on the market. And they realize that prevention and decreasing this model of sick care has to be addressed. But how we're going to weave our way through the FDA process is we're first going to get our drugs approved for acute inflammation. And why this is important is because if people would take our drugs to decrease or prevent acute inflammation and they can do it safely, then it's going to expand to being able to use it for chronic inflammation. And once we can do that, then we can get to the big thing that all longevity experts agree to is that low-grade chronic inflammation drives the progression of disease and decreases our longevity and health span. So we have to go through a stepwise approach in order to get this drug available to everybody. But as we approach acute inflammation, we have had amazing results with our phase 2 clinical trials. And
You mentioned the key thing there. You're well on your journey here. I'd love to learn about, because you've made a lot of progress from the inception of where you guys started to where you are today. And I'd love the world to know about where you are on your journey and some of the progress and what you're most excited about.
yeah, we're most excited about our recent phase 2 clinical trial with Duke University, where we gave one of the assets in our platform, we gave to 100 patients and 50 received placebo. And these patients had active COVID. Now, they had a very mild case of active COVID. We did not see a huge inflammatory response, but the more important thing we did see is the side effect profile of our product. And why that side effect profile is important is because, as I said, in order to use our drug long term, you will need the best side effect profile ever in order to decrease inflammation long term. So the side effect profile was key. And I had a hypothesis that not only would we see less side effects, but we would see it by a mechanism of action that would be totally new into the anti-inflammatory space. So we hit our numbers, and we have all these signals that this is exactly what's going on with this combination. And most importantly, we can apply what we learned to our one phase 2 clinical trial to the entire platform. And we are creating an entire platform of a new category of anti-inflammatories that will be the most potent anti-inflammatory, the most broadest spectrum, and can be used long term.
Why don't you talk a little about what we all, Unity, after we got the data and we did a lot of sub-analysis work around the data, we were looking for what next, like where do we take this?
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, and the advent of AI has been such a phenomenal tool for us. We use it all the time, and we've got one of the top AI advisors in the world. Using AI and using our resources and using everything, we landed on the greatest application based on the results that we have is to be used with GLP-1s and for MASH. So why don't you talk a little about how, and we just put out a press release on that because we're just learning. Now it's hard to think that because, Govia and Ozempic, they're household names now, but they've really been only on the market for 2 or 3 years. And now we have 2 and 3 years worth of data, and we're learning that a lot of people, the side effects are nausea, vomiting, and what's the third one?
Talking about headaches, and one of your last times, Jackie, on stage, you were talking about how this can help people even in advance of a hangover or when they're drinking. So yeah, all of this realm is what I'm looking to learn about in terms of kind of what's next, the press release you mentioned, and also kind of why you're so excited about the early data that you're getting.
Yeah, just finished with the GLP-1. People go off of it because of the inability to, but what we're finding out is long-term use of GLP-1s that we're hitting a set point and people are starting to gain weight back. And then there's also this disproportion of muscle loss versus fat loss. And then what our drug can do to all of that could really help the GLP-1s out and lead into MASH. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm just gonna connect a few dots, okay?
Please.
Unity, you asked about alcohol hangover, and we also earlier have spoken about how our drug could be used to decrease substance abuse. And all of these, what we're now understanding in the realm of science and medical care is that the inflammation is generating and progressing all of these chronic illnesses, including substance abuse. And if we can reduce inflammation, both neuroinflammation and systemic inflammation, we can prevent the progression of these diseases from taking hold, shaping, and growing over time. Because inflammation is not like other disease states. What's curious and interesting and problematic about inflammation and why it's dogged us for so many years is because when inflammation begins, it's like a snowball going down a hill. It just continues to gather and gather and gather. And we now know that to be true because we can actually measure all these biomarkers of inflammation. It's just not how we feel. We can actually measure it. And so when we're looking at the alcohol hangover as an example of reducing acute inflammation, we first have to have a bit of an educational barrier. Number one, inflammation is extremely inflammatory, but people think it's dehydration, the reason why it causes a hangover. And we're going to prove that that's not true. It's inflammation. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to monitor all the inflammation biomarkers to show you not just how you feel, but by showing you the biomarkers, the science behind why this works. And the alcohol hangover prevention, it is not just decreasing the inflammation from a single event, but every time you drink alcohol, you just keep increasing your inflammation in your body. And it's leading to GI disruption, and also it's leading to liver disease. And not only what is it doing in your brain. So we are preventative that a customer could take as a single dose, or we're trying to show that chronically you can even stop the progression of diseases like cardiometabolic diseases, like upper respiratory infections that lead to perhaps long COVID. And that has a lot of inflammation and metabolic inflammation associated with it, all the way to your renal disease, your cancer, your autoimmune disease. So you see, a lot of the problems we have with inflammation is understanding it. And a lot of times, the beginning of inflammation occurs about 7 years on average before you feel the first effects of it by noticing some tissue damage or a disability. And that's when you go to the doctor. But it's kind of too late because all of these cells are injured and dying. So
You're well on your journey here. What's next? And obviously, it takes funding through these cycles. You've had such amazing partners. You mentioned Duke, working with on your phase 2. Who are you looking to meet for these next phases of your journey? And what are you most excited about? What's coming down the pipe that the world needs to know about?
Let me just set this up, and then because I think it's really important. So we are, for the alcohol hangover therapeutic, we are in a phase 2 clinical trial with that right now. So that's underway, and we will start dosing patients at the end of this month. Have some early data readout by the end of this year. Then the other important element of work that we've been doing is around opioid use disorder, and we're being co-sponsored by or sponsored by the National Institute of Drug Abuse. They're doing animal studies for us now, looking at our drug for methamphetamine use disorder, and then bringing it back to what we're super excited about because of the most recent discoveries is around the GLP, our drug that we just finished with Duke for the GLP-1s and MASH. And let's talk about some of the next steps with that and who we might be able to, who would be great if we met.
Yes, sure. So the partnership with the National Institute of Drug Abuse is just a paramount because what this signals to us and everyone is what we've been saying, that if you decrease neuroinflammation, you can make a benefit to substance use disorder. And that's just the first step in understanding.
Can you repeat the last second because your video cut off? So just go back to where you started about 10 seconds ago.
Yes. So what I was saying is us being co-sponsored by the National Institute of Drug Abuse is one of the biggest feathers in our caps because substance abuse is not only opioids, methamphetamine, it's a whole slew of items. It's alcohol, it's tobacco, it's food, it's gambling, it's shopping. There's so many things that go on in our brain with behavior that causes us to get into an abuse issue. And so when the National Institute of Drug Abuse began to understand, we had been working on for so long, that it's inflammation that drives that by creating something that a medication that can decrease that inflammation is paramount to the entire platform and how we wish to use that as it relates to cardiometabolics. is that if we can decrease neuroinflammation, we can decrease the activation of the brain that causes you to have hunger and not feel full, and also to keep defending your set weight. These work. So, in other words, a person who is constantly dieting, but they find it hard in the maintenance cycle to keep that weight off, that's because the set weight point keeps pushing you upward to what your body thinks you should be. And this is all driven by inflammation. If you decrease the inflammation, then your body's going to start working towards you being that 20% less in weight. And so that's how the GLPs were working, and it's really important. They were approved for chronic therapy, but mostly the way it's used is that you take the drug, you decrease the weight, and now you wanna stop taking them because of their tolerability issues. But that's when the set point starts rising back again, and you regain that weight. And so the way our drug works is that it keeps that set weight point low. You can take it, you can take off your GLP-1 and you can continue to take our drug to decrease that set weight point while you're also preferably metabolizing fat instead of muscle.
Now,
And
is
so
this why you decided to go more of a platform route to be able to integrate with all these other elements that you're talking about? There's the GLP-1 revolution, there's some of the other innovations going on. Is that kind of why you created this platform approach?
exactly. When we found the biggest clinical part to support this platform was this phase 2 clinical obtained during the Duke trial is because we now can see that our new chemical, when we combine two drugs together that are always known to be safe, we took them together and we realized that we have this very broad spectrum anti-inflammatory pathway, including the one that is going to give you the clinical benefits I just spoke about in the obesity and associated liver disease space. And so that's just one application of how we can take two drugs together and use it for that issue. But our entire platform has multiple different assets of different combinations of the same categories of drugs, which will have the same mechanism of action, but we can use them for different things, like decreasing alcohol's effect on your body or decreasing substance use disorder or decreasing the progression of low-grade chronic inflammation as it relates to longevity. And so that's why it's a platform, because we can take the basic mechanism of action and this wonderful broad spectrum anti-inflammatory component, and we can start using it just for all these different items that people complain about or want a solution for, but there's nothing on the market that can do what ours
Well, we
does.
need to get this to market. Where can people learn more about you? Where can people get in touch with you? There's a vast audience here of organizations, of funders who think will want to get in touch with you to learn more about how to get involved. Where would you like people to reach you?
Yeah, so we could, our website at senjam.com, sen-jam.com. Talked earlier, we just initiated another crowdfunding campaign on WeFunder. We continue to step into the venture community. There are companies like ours, and to a large degree, the capital's not flowing into the market. We hear all these excuses, and we don't get caught up in the excuses. We've got a mission to drive our 5 lead assets that are in or at phase 2. Our goal over the next 2 years, get all 5 of those through phase 2 clinical trials and advance our IP around the 5 assets as well. We have over 60 patents and patents pending currently, and we've just retained Destin Partners to seek licensed strategic partners for our 2 lead assets, which are for the impacting the inflammation associated with alcohol, which is SJP001, and then also our new metabolic SJP002C, the trial that we just finished. So Destin Partners is seeking strategic partners. That could be either co-development partner, a in-licensing partner, or acquisition of the asset. And we have started engaging in people who are interested in the assets.
Another way to learn about Sen-Jam and might pique people's interest is if you're in the longevity world and you are thinking that's where the investment space should be, that we were just written up in an Oppenheimer analyst report on longevity. And it spoke about how this longevity market is going to be 3 times bigger than the obesity market. So if you're into that type of innovation,
It's growing so rapidly now. You mentioned lifespan and longevity. It's just it's finally, thankfully, becoming a true category of growth and opportunity. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
well,
Make sure to put all these links in the show notes to that Oppenheimer report, Sen-Jam, Sen-Jam.com, and then also your WeFunder. I know you've been very successful on WeFunder, and we'd love to make sure all of those 5 assets get funded through the journey. Any last words of wisdom to share with the world? I'd like to have regular check-ins with you all because you just seem to be, every time we talk, from the last time, there's been a quantum leap forward. And Jim, you mentioned how AI is really powering a lot of speeding up the innovation cycles for you. I'd like to have these regular check-ins so we can keep tabs on the progress. And I know it's such a journey to bring these extraordinary transformative assets to market. And Jackie, you mentioned the hurdles of going through FDA. This is not an easy thing. This is definitely a long-term venture, and you guys are really navigating it in really over the past years. So excited to see where this goes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, the one last thing is we just made the discovery around where our therapeutic can be used in the GLP-1 and MASH space. And we are starting outreach to companies that could truly benefit from that. And we're trying to make as many contacts, being Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly,
Amgen.
Pfizer, and BI. We just started today of putting out our outreach because we can really help them extend the life and duration, given the patents that we have that go through the 2040s. And combining with the work that we're doing, we could really be a benefit to them and also support our mission to being a benefit to humanity.
Well, thank you both for the extraordinary vision and work that you're doing. I always love catching up with you. Look forward to seeing you in person again soon. And I want to come visit you because I love the background there. It looks a beautiful forest there behind you. I want to come visit wherever you are today. So thank you for sharing the updates and looking forward to seeing you soon here.
Okay.
Great.
It's always so nice to speak with health transformers who really have big visions and are persevering through the extraordinary journey it takes to bring innovation to market, especially when you got to go through and navigate the FDA as part of your process, like Sen-Jam is doing. You can connect with Jim Iversen and Jackie Iversen at sen-jam.com and also check out their fundraising effort on wefunder.com, and really learn about the amazing work they're doing in the anti-inflammatory market here and bringing new innovation to market in this category. So thanks for being here. Please look into the amazing work that Sen-Jam is doing.